Hello, welcome back to the weekly astrology podcast where we weave the transits of the week into the phases of the lunar cycle. I am your host, Sarah Paasch. This week brings us to that Leo new moon and the new lunar cycle. This Leo new moon is putting an important spotlight on Pluto retrograde and Aquarius, and it's also foreshadowing a secret beginning point to major changes connected to two eclipses happening in 2027. If you aren't already, make sure to subscribe to this channel and turn your notifications on to make sure that you get these episodes when they're released every week with the next lunar phase. All right, we're ready to dive in. Let's get started. On Thursday, July 24th, we are here to celebrate this new moon at 12:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time at 2 degrees of Leo, positioned in an exact opposition to Pluto retrograde in Aquarius. The first thing that both the moon and the sun on Thursday are going to do is come into this tense opposition with Pluto. That means that this Pluto opposition is really baked into the energy of the new moon and will be playing out and coming up throughout this entire lunar cycle ahead. I want to start by just kind of going over and reviewing some of the things that tend to come up when we're going through a Pluto opposition. Planets in opposition to Pluto tend to bring up power struggles and deeper fears or emotions that might have previously been hidden beneath the surface that need to be brought into the light of awareness for integration into consciousness. This is so that we can evolve our ability to participate more effectively. Transits with Pluto, especially in these dynamic aspects like the conjunction, the square, or the opposition, always tend to really amplify and intensify some of those Plutonic themes and emotions. It's always really helpful if we kind of brace ourselves with the awareness that it's important to be really vulnerable and vulnerably honest about whatever it is that's coming up that needs to be addressed, whether it's a deeper feeling within us for us to take a look at, or it might be something that's coming up either in relationships or in something happening outside of us. Oppositions in astrology tend to express themselves as an external event or person, triggering the tension that's coming up. Sometimes because of this, it might be easy to miss some of the ways that we might be contributing or the capacity that we have ourselves to alter the dynamic by adjusting ourselves, whether that's through mindset or action. And so the first thing to just take note of is that there is a trigger warning with these Pluto oppositions. And if the first instinct is to want to just defend or to blame whatever it is that's happening outside of ourselves, to have that sense of curiosity and that kind of worked in consideration, so to speak, that there might be something inside, internally, that if we take a deeper look, if we have a greater curiosity and level of engagement or willingness to engage or adjust, we might actually have more to work with. So considering these themes of a transit with Pluto, the opposition, the nature of the intensity, the power struggle, tension, we're going to apply those themes to Leo and specifically to the sun in Leo, because that's really the main player. The sun is the ruler of this new moon in Leo because that is the sun's home. If we think about Leo as this place where we are meant to really celebrate our authentic nature and our unique creative expressions or creative gifts, the Leo place of our chart is the place that tells us where we need to feel safe to shine and confident in our being. And if we have that safe place where we feel confident in who we are and we feel encouraged to share ourselves authentically, then this is the place in our charts where we can really become more alive with purpose and vitality, because that is the place where the sun rules. Whether you have any planets or no planets, we all have a Leo place in our chart. And so with this Leo new moon sitting opposite Pluto and Aquarius, we are called and invited to identifying the ways that we might shine away from owning our power or our purpose. This Leo new moon, it's asking where and when do you dim your light? Where you notice it feels like playing small might feel like the best strategy for safety and belonging. And also with Pluto involved, how might you be deflecting your power by performing confidence rather than relaxing into embodying confidence? Do you fight to prove yourself as a way to mask or fight maybe a fear that you aren't good enough? This Leo new moon is really not shying away from holding this mirror up to really ask us to take a look. When we look in that mirror, what do we see? And also, what about the mirrors in front of us, like the people that we're in relationships with or the environments that we're in? If those things outside of ourselves aren't able to hold a really clear mirror to encourage our authenticity, to encourage our confidence, to encourage our ability to feel good enough, are we giving our power to that mirror? And what would it be like to return the power of that reflection to ourselves, to the mirror within? I shared a post for this Leo new moon cycle on my social media platforms, both on TikTok and Instagram, so you can check it out there, where I wrote a little bit more and offered some deeper reflections around these themes connected to the idea of light refraction. And that's what I was called to explore, this idea of light being bent by the different surfaces that reflect it. So if you want to dive deeper into that exploration, or if you'd like to read more about some of my thoughts on this Leo new moon, I really encourage you to go check that out. And if you need a playlist to dance back into your strength of your inherent worth, to come back to calling your radiance back, your power back, to reclaiming the reflection that you choose to remember no matter what or who is mirroring you, don't worry, babe, I made a playlist. You can check out the Spotify playlist that is curated and created custom for inspiring you through and with the themes of this Leo new moon and throughout the whole cycle, really. So just to touch back on the Leo new moon and that opposition to Pluto, I know that this energy is really intense, and this is definitely not what I would call an easy new moon or an easy lunar cycle. However, I really do want to just reflect and remind all of us that the intention and the potential of what it would be like to go through this lunar cycle and come out the other side even stronger in our capacity to not only hold and embody our confidence and our light, but also to more confidently and freely and authentically share that with the world, share that with others with a sense of greater purpose and meaning. So again, this isn't a moment to play shy or to play small. This is actually the moment to say yes, to show up. And a question to leave you with on this Leo new moon is, if you could remember that your light may be bent, but it can never be broken, how might you show up differently to where it is that you feel like you're struggling? As I mentioned in the beginning of this episode, this new moon is also pointing a spotlight directly on that Pluto and Aquarius. And so that's also casting a spotlight on the overall Pluto and Aquarius transit, as well as the participation or relationship of the Leo Aquarius axis in our charts. We are just beginning this 20-year process of deep plutonic change. So if you look to your chart for the houses that Leo and Aquarius rule, and you look to the themes of those houses, how are the themes of these houses showing up for you, especially right now at the time of this new moon? Do you recognize themes of empowerment being activated here, or themes that have been activated and there's something around the time of this Leo new moon opposite Pluto that's amplifying or giving a microphone to some of those lessons and changes? Is there any old way of engaging with these topics, with these house topics, that's asking for a change? Is it becoming more obvious which forms of participation need to end, need to be composted, so that you can open yourself to a new way of being? An easy way to locate this is to ask, what's draining my energy right now? What has felt like a drain, a distraction, something that's exhausting my ability to show up and feel confident, to feel excited, passionate? These are the places that maybe if you pause and consider, what if I could lean into Pluto's energy of destruction and I could actually ask or use that destructive energy to help eliminate what's no longer working, no longer serving me? Whenever we have Pluto transiting a planet, especially by those hard or dynamic aspects that I mentioned earlier, so the conjunction, the square, the opposition, we're always going to have to go through that evolution process with Pluto. And that usually always begins with a phase of destruction. And that phase is always the hardest, the more resistant to change that we are, specifically change within ourselves. Pluto always surfaces the things that we've become so instinctually, habitually just comfortable with. It's like our coping and survival strategies for living. And all of a sudden, those things, those coping strategies, those skills, they're not only not working anymore, they're not as effective, they're actually draining us, or they're causing destruction in our relationships or outside of us. So Pluto is telling you, hey, babe, like you've got to admit this isn't working. And you have to take your power back by saying, I am willing to change. I am willing to open myself up to the idea that maybe there's a new way to do this, that maybe I've outgrown this strategy or this way of coping. And so the more that we lean into that and we invite the destruction as this elimination and really this composting, this sacrifice and surrender to Pluto to say, okay, I'm no longer going to fight. I'm no longer going to drain myself by getting stuck in these power struggles of control or of resistance to change. I'm ready to say, yes, please let me change. Let me be changed. Let me surrender to what it is that I need to let go or that would benefit me in letting go. So in addition to working with the intentions that we're setting for this lunar cycle, for this Leo new moon, we also can be mindful and use this Leo new moon to set intentions for that bigger long-term Pluto transit in our chart. Whether you have Pluto transiting a natal planet, we all have Aquarius in our chart, and Pluto is going to be here helping us to change and evolve this place in our chart until 2044. So what would it be like to get that process started in a more conscious and intentional way and really work with this new moon to seed more deeply those intentions and ways that you are ready and willing to say yes to Pluto? Comment below. Tell me, how are people doing? How are we feeling? Like, what is coming up for you with these Pluto oppositions and this Leo new moon? I want to hear where people are at. Fill me in. And then the next major transit that we're going to just briefly touch on for this Leo new moon week is going to be on Monday, late Monday, July 28th. The moon is going to shift into Libra. And this is important because when the moon moves into Libra, there's going to be this activation of an aspect in modern astrology referred to as the Kite. And the Kite is actually a combination of other major traditional aspects. It's on one hand a beautiful, supportive, flowing grand trine. Grand trines in any element by themselves are one of the most magical and powerfully supportive transits that we can receive in astrology. When we have that stability matched with the power of a trine and resource between all three signs of the same element, there's a greater momentum of manifestation and support that the planets in these signs can bring and can collaboratively stabilize us to move energy forward in a positive direction. The moon in Libra is going to activate that grand air trine with Uranus in Gemini and Pluto in Aquarius. And then there is the opposition part of the Kite. This is the tail of the Kite. The tail, or the planets in opposition, actually become the release point, or they tell the story of the tension that needs to be confronted and worked through and integrated in order to really manifest and make the most of the potential for this grand air trine, not just to resource and stabilize the potential energy between those three air signs, but also to give it a backbone in order to take flight, to go higher and farther. And for the moon in Libra and soon to be Mars in Libra, that means that this tail of the Kite, this opposition, this confrontation or release point is happening between the Libra moon or Mars and Saturn Neptune retrograde in Aries. And so while today I'm not going to go in depth in covering the different layers interpretively for these aspects, I'm going to save that for Mars next week. I do want to just point out with the moon coming here, it's really kind of foreshadowing the territory that Mars is soon to cover. So I'd like to just invite you during this time to just kind of pay attention. What ways might the moon be setting circumstances or the feeling tone in preparation for Mars entering Libra and activating these grand air trines, these oppositions to Saturn and Neptune in the following week during our first quarter lunar phase. Next up on Wednesday, July 30th, we have Venus entering into the sign of Cancer, the home of the moon, the place where Jupiter is currently visiting and inviting us to soften into spaces of greater vulnerability and intimacy with our relationships, as well as activating our desires for safety and security. Venus will be in Cancer through August 25th. During that time, she is going to be co-present with the greater benefic Jupiter, currently in Cancer, exalted. So we've got our benefics co-present with each other, hanging out in Cancer. And while that's incredibly magical and blessed and benefic, Venus will first be asking us to return to some of those themes and reality checks, the sobering considerations that we were asked to review and confront back in the month of June. Because right after Venus enters into Cancer, the first thing she has to do is immediately square Saturn and Neptune in Aries. I'm going to be going into more details on those squares in next week's episodes. This is really how we're starting that next lunar phase, is confronting the things that Venus is bringing to our attention during those squares, potentially reviewing or returning to some of those more difficult themes that were coming up in the previous cycle. So go ahead, make sure that you're subscribed, you've got the notifications on, you don't want to miss that video. I just want to caution everybody that beginning on Wednesday, you might already start to feel some of that old energy from June returning, kind of remembering or bringing things back up. Of course, if you haven't already watched it, checking out some of those episodes from the previous lunar phases in that Cancer lunar cycle where we went deep into those squares to Saturn and Neptune and Aries, that could be really helpful also to just kind of remember, kind of check back in, because now we're just bringing all of that back up, but with Venus and everything that Venus represents. Again, more to come next week. Make sure you tune in. For now, for this episode, we're going to go ahead and come to the final transit of this week, maybe the biggest transit besides that Leo new moon opposite Pluto, and that's on Thursday, July 31st. We've got the moon moving into Scorpio, where it's going to square Pluto, meaning that it's going to bring those Leo new moon things back up. It's likely going to reactivate them from a new reflection point. And on that same day with the moon in Scorpio, we've got Mercury retrograde making its inferior conjunction to the sun at 9 degrees of Leo. The conjunction with Mercury retrograde and the sun, or the Cazimi, usually it's a point of illuminating and bringing into awareness more fully or clearly what the themes of this retrograde cycle are either asking us to more deeply uncover or look at, or giving us a clearer picture of why it is things seem to be going the way they are, right? We get some sort of clarity, like what is this cycle really about? And it also marks the halfway point of the retrogrades. And something very important and extra special about this Mercury Cazimi is that this Mercury Cazimi is happening at 9 degrees of Leo. And this happens to be the exact degree point of a total solar eclipse in Leo on August 2nd, 2027. If you remember in the beginning of this episode where I mentioned a secret beginning point being foreshadowed, this is it. This Cazimi is really pointing to this place in Leo where major beginnings and accelerated changes are going to happen with that 2027 eclipse. This is extra important for people to pay attention to who have planets or points around that 9-degree Leo mark. This is a highly personal, highly charged point with that total solar eclipse coming in 2027. And so this is not just any Cazimi, right? And so for all of us, whether you do or do not have anything around 9 degrees of Leo, I think it's going to be really important and valuable for all of us to seriously consider the value of addressing whatever is coming up right now as something that could be preparing you for fated changes that are coming in 2027, that are coming 2 years down the road with those eclipses. So take your notes, pay attention, be an active listener to life right now, and say yes to engaging, to asking more questions, to investigating, researching, reviewing, or potentially reprogramming or rewiring any limiting beliefs that might be presenting themselves at this time around those themes that we really highlighted with the Leo new moon, to share yourself creatively, to be authentic in your expression, to feel good enough, right? To feel relaxed and embodied and a confidence in who you are. All right, in next week's episode, we work through Venus's squares to Saturn and Neptune retrograde in Aries. We receive a grand fire trine from the moon in Sagittarius. This is here to resource us with renewed inspiration, passion, and creative energy. And we launch. We hard launch, that first grand air trine kite formation when we have Mars officially entering into Libra. In addition to covering the specifics around transits and timing during an astrology session, a one-on-one session, I also include coaching support in every session that I have. And basically what that means that whether it's workshopping practical strategies, mindset shifts, or really having this safe container and space for deeper emotional support and processing, anything that you might be feeling stuck or struggling to move forward in a more confident and clear way, these are things that the one-on-one consultations, that container can really support you in. So if that's something that you are interested in, you can use the link below to book a session. Or if you have any questions, you can just reach out to me personally by email, and I'd love to hear from you and connect. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for sharing your light and your time with me on this episode for the Leo new moon. I am wishing everyone new moon blessings of radiance, strength, and creative power. I will see you back here next week for that first quarter lunar phase. Thanks, guys.